The most painful childhoods don't look traumatic. They look quiet. They had no intention of hurting you. They just never noticed you were hurting. And that silence became your whole childhood. There's a specific moment in every emotionally neglected child's life. A moment so subtle that even they don't recognize it's happening. It's the moment they stop asking for love. Not because they don't need it anymore, but because they've learned something devastating. Asking is dangerous. Picture this. She's 6 years old, standing in her mother's doorway. She's had a nightmare. She's scared. She needs comfort. She whispers, "Mom?" Nothing. "Mom, I had a bad dream." Her mother sighs, that particular sigh loaded with exhaustion and resentment, and says without looking up, "Go back to bed. I can't deal with this right now." The child returns to her room, lies in the dark, and something inside her makes a decision. Never again. Never ask again. It's safer to need nothing than to be rejected for needing anything. This is the exact moment emotional neglect becomes emotional programming, and that programming will run her entire life until she finally understands what happened in that doorway. Childhood emotional neglect doesn't announce itself with dramatic moments. It accumulates in 1,000 small silences. But there's always a moment, sometimes remembered, often forgotten, when the child stops reaching out. Maybe it was the time you excitedly showed your parent a drawing and they barely looked up from their phone. "That's nice, honey," delivered in a monotone that said you were an interruption. Maybe it was when you tried to tell them about being bullied at school and they responded with, "Kids are mean. You'll get over it. Problem solved. Conversation closed. Your pain dismissed." Maybe it was when you cried about something that mattered to you and they said, "Stop being so sensitive. It's not a big deal." Teaching you that your feelings were wrong, excessive, shameful. Or maybe it was quieter than that. Maybe they were just never fully there, physically present but emotionally absent, going through the motions of parenting without ever actually seeing you. And at some point, your child brain did the math. Asking for attention equals feeling rejected. Not asking equals staying safe. So you stopped asking. You stopped showing them your art. You stopped telling them about your day. You stopped crying when you were hurt. You became the easy child, the independent one, the child who never needs anything. And everyone praised you for it. You're so mature for your age. You're so self-sufficient. I wish my kid was as low maintenance as you. But nobody asked why a 7-year-old had learned to need nothing. Nobody wondered what it cost you to become that convenient. In Running on Empty by Dr. Jonas Webb, she explains that children don't consciously decide to stop asking for love. It's an adaptive survival response. The child's nervous system learns emotional expression equals rejection. Emotional suppression equals safety. And that lesson gets encoded so deeply that decades later, you still can't ask for what you need without feeling like you're doing something wrong. Subscribe. If you believe the easy child often paid the highest price, only people who were never that child will ignore this. Here's what's happening neurologically when a child stops asking for love. Every time a child reaches out for emotional connection and gets nothing back, or worse, gets punished for reaching, their brain releases stress hormones. Cortisol floods their developing amygdala. Their nervous system flags the experience. Danger. Vulnerability equals threat. Don't do this again. And if this pattern repeats not once, but hundreds of times, the brain doesn't just learn a lesson. It rewires itself around that lesson. The pathways for I need something, I ask for it, I receive care, never fully develop. Those neural highways never get built. Instead, different pathways form. I need something, I suppress it, I take care of it myself, I survive. This creates what psychologists call emotional self-sufficiency, the deeply ingrained belief that you must handle everything alone because asking for help is too risky. But emotional self-sufficiency isn't actually strength. It's a trauma response masquerading as maturity. In The Body Keeps the Score, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk explains that early emotional neglect literally alters brain development. The areas responsible for emotional regulation, trust, and secure attachment become underdeveloped. Meanwhile, the areas responsible for threat detection become hyperactive. So you grow up with a brain that's exceptional at spotting danger, but terrible at recognizing safety. You walk into rooms scanning for signs you're unwanted. You interpret neutral expressions as rejection. You read into every slight change in tone. Because your brain learned early. People are unreliable. Love is conditional. Safety comes from needing nothing. And here's the devastating part. Even when you encounter safe people, people who genuinely want to care for you, your nervous system still screams, "Don't trust this, don't ask, you'll be rejected." So you stay emotionally distant even when you're physically close. You perform intimacy without ever truly letting anyone in. Because the 6-year-old standing in that doorway, hearing that sigh, learning that her needs were a burden, she's still running the show. When children stop asking for love, something has to fill that space. And what fills it are beliefs deeply held, mostly unconscious convictions about how the world works and who they are in it. Belief 1. Love must be earned. If your parents' attention and affection weren't freely given, your child brain concluded that you hadn't earned them yet. So you became the straight A student, the perfect helper, the child who never caused problems. You tried to become so valuable, so useful, so flawless that maybe finally you deserve their love. And this belief follows you into adulthood. You overwork to earn your boss's approval. You overfunction in relationships to earn your partner's affection. You overextend yourself with friends to earn their continued friendship. You've been auditioning for love your entire life, and no amount of applause ever feels like enough. Belief 2. My needs are a burden. Every time you asked for something and got rejection, annoyance, or absence, you learned that your needs cause problems. So you stopped having them. Or more accurately, you stopped expressing them. Now, as an adult, you can't ask for help, even when you're drowning. You apologize when you're sick. You minimize your pain. You say, "I'm fine," when you're falling apart. Because somewhere deep in your nervous system, you still believe that needing anything makes you unlovable. Belief 3. I have to handle everything alone. When no one showed up for you emotionally, you learned that you're the only person you can rely on. So, you became hyper-independent. You refuse help, even when it's offered. You pride yourself on never needing anyone. But underneath that, independence is profound loneliness. Because humans aren't meant to carry everything alone. We're wired for interdependence, for leaning on others and having others lean on us. But that was never modeled for you. Belief 4. If I show my real feelings, I'll be rejected. You learned that emotional authenticity leads to abandonment. So you perform whatever version of yourself seems safest. Happy when you're sad. Strong when you're scared. Fine when you're breaking. And over decades of this performance, you lose touch with your authentic self entirely. In the drama of The Gifted Child, Alice Miller explains that children who aren't allowed to be themselves develop a false self, a personality built to please others at the expense of their own truth. And that false self becomes so convincing that even you forget it's a mask. You become a stranger to your own emotions. Share this if you recognize these patterns. The child who stopped asking for love becomes an adult with very specific, heartbreaking patterns. You're the person everyone calls in crisis, but you never call anyone. You're exceptional at showing up for others. You listen for hours. You drop everything to help. You're the reliable one, the strong one, the one people lean on. But when you're struggling, you suffer in silence. Because asking for support still feels like weakness, like burdening people, like like risking rejection. You're in relationships where you're giving 90% and pretending it's equal. You're the one who always compromises, who always accommodates, who bends yourself into whatever shape your partner needs. And when they don't reciprocate, you don't complain. You just give more. Because somewhere inside, you believe that's the only way to keep them. You achieve external success, but feel hollow inside. You've checked all the boxes: the degree, the career, the relationship, the life that looks perfect from the outside. But you feel like a fraud, like you're performing success rather than experiencing it. Like one wrong move will expose that you don't actually deserve any of it. Because success doesn't heal the wound of never feeling inherently worthy. Achievement doesn't fill the void left by a childhood where you learned your value was conditional. You can't rest without guilt. Your productivity is how you prove you deserve to exist. So rest feels like failure, downtime feels like wasted time. You've convinced yourself you're just hardworking or driven. But really, you're terrified that if you stop performing, people will realize you're not actually valuable. You're terrified of being too much, too emotional, too needy, too complicated, too much work. So you make yourself smaller, you edit your words before speaking, you downplay your feelings, you take up as little space as possible. And when someone says they want to know the real you, you panic, because you genuinely don't know if the real you is acceptable. You test people's love by seeing how little you can ask for. If they stay when you need nothing, then maybe their love is real. But if you ask for something and they leave, that confirms what you always suspected. You were only tolerable when you were convenient. So you never ask. And you're chronically unsure if anyone actually loves you or just tolerates you because you're easy. In Attached by Dr. Amir Levine, he describes this as anxious avoidant attachment, simultaneously craving closeness and being terrified of it. You want to be seen, but you're scared of what people will see. You want connection, but you've learned connection isn't safe. All these adult patterns trace back to one devastating core belief. Love is not something you deserve. It's something you must earn. And here's why that belief is so damaging. If love must be earned, then it can also be lost, which means you're never safe. You're always one mistake away from abandonment. So you live in constant performance mode, constantly auditioning, constantly trying to prove you're worth keeping. You can't relax into love because you believe the moment you stop earning it, it will disappear. This creates what psychologists call conditional self-worth, where your value as a person is tied to external factors rather than your inherent existence. You're only worthy when you're productive, successful, helpful, convenient, perfect, undemanding, invisible. But the second you're struggling, needy, imperfect, inconvenient, emotional, visible, your worth plummets. And since it's impossible to maintain perfection forever, you live in chronic anxiety that your flaws will be discovered and you'll be discarded. Here's what emotionally neglected children were never taught. You don't earn love by being perfect. You receive love by being human. Love isn't a transaction where you exchange performance for acceptance. It's a relationship where you're valued for existing, not for what you provide. But if you never experienced that kind of love as a child, the concept feels foreign, even suspicious. When someone offers unconditional acceptance, your brain can't process it. It must be a trick. They must not really see you. They must be lying. Because your core belief says, if people really knew me, my needs, my mess, my depth, they wouldn't stay. And that belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you never let people truly know you, you never get evidence that contradicts the belief. You perform. They love the performance, which confirms, see, they don't actually love me. They love what I do for them. In self-compassion, by Dr. Kristen Neff, she explains that true self-worth comes from self-acceptance, not self-esteem. Self-esteem is conditional. I'm worthy when I succeed. Self-compassion is unconditional. I'm worthy because I'm human. And all humans deserve compassion. But emotionally neglected children never learned self-compassion. They learned self-criticism, self-monitoring, self-suppression. They learned that the self is something to improve, not something to accept. Here's something nobody tells you about childhood emotional neglect. It doesn't just affect how you relate to yourself. It determines who you're attracted to and what you tolerate in relationships. You're drawn to emotionally unavailable people. Not consciously, but your nervous system recognizes something familiar in their distance. It feels like home. The partner who's never quite all in. The friend who's supportive but never asks how you're doing. The parent who loves you in their way, but never the way you need. These relationships feel comfortable because they match your childhood template. Love is something you chase, not something freely given. And chasing feels normal. Earning feels like how relationships work. Unconditional acceptance feels suspicious. You stay in relationships long past their expiration date. Because leaving feels like admitting you failed to earn their love. If you just try harder, give more, become better, maybe they'll finally see your worth. So you tolerate crumbs. You accept the bare minimum. You convince yourself that inconsistent affection is just how they show love. Meanwhile, you're emotionally starving in relationships that provide just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to feel secure. You can't recognize when someone is actually available. When you encounter someone who's consistent, present, and genuinely interested in you, your alarm bells go off. What do they want from me? This is too good to be true. They'll leave when they see the real me. So you sabotage. You push them away. You find flaws that justify your discomfort. Because your nervous system learned available equals dangerous. Unavailable equals familiar. Familiar equals safe. In Wired for Love by Stan Tatkin, he explains that our nervous systems seek the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. So emotionally neglected children grow into adults who repeatedly choose partners who can't fully show up because that's the attachment style their brain recognizes as love. You're the emotional caretaker in every relationship. You're the one managing everyone's feelings, anticipating needs, preventing conflict, making sure everyone else is comfortable. Because that was your role in childhood. Be so attuned to others' emotions that you can keep yourself safe by keeping them regulated. But now you're exhausted because you're still parenting adults the way you had to parent yourself as a child. And when you finally break and express a need, when you finally ask for something, people are shocked. You never need anything. What's wrong? What's wrong is that you've been dying of thirst while handing out water. And nobody noticed because you made your thirst invisible. Share this with someone choosing the wrong people. Subscribe if you believe attachment patterns can change. Let's talk about what you've lost by learning not to ask for love. You've lost the ability to receive. When someone tries to give you something, help, compliments, care, gifts, you deflect. Oh, you didn't have to. It's not a big deal. I'm fine, really. Because receiving means being seen as needing, and needing means being vulnerable, and vulnerable means potentially being rejected. So you've closed yourself off from one of life's greatest experiences, being genuinely cared for without having to earn it. You've lost access to your own feelings. When someone asks, "How are you feeling?" you genuinely don't know. You've suppressed your emotions for so long that you've lost the ability to recognize them. You exist in a kind of emotional numbness, punctuated by occasional overwhelming waves of feeling that you can't name or understand. You've lost the experience of being fully known. No one has ever seen all of you your needs, your fears, your mess, your depth, because you've never shown all of you. So even in your closest relationships, you feel profoundly lonely. Because the version of you people love isn't the real you. It's the edited, palatable, convenient version. And you live with the constant terror. If they really knew me, would they stay? You've lost the freedom to be imperfect. You can't have bad days without guilt. You can't make mistakes without spiraling into shame. You can't ask for patience without feeling like a burden. Because your worth is performance-based. So any drop in performance feels like a threat to your existence. You've lost the peace that comes from trusting people. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for people to get tired of you, for your flaws to be noticed, and for the inevitable rejection. So you can't rest into relationships. You can't trust that people will stay. You're perpetually braced for abandonment. In Daring Greatly, Brené Brown writes, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity." But emotional neglect taught you that vulnerability is the birthplace of rejection. So you've protected yourself from pain, and in doing so, protected yourself from connection. There usually comes a moment when the pattern breaks, when the cost of silence finally outweighs the fear of speaking. Maybe it's a panic attack that comes out of nowhere. Maybe it's a relationship ending because you never let them in. Maybe it's achieving everything you thought would make you happy and realizing you still feel empty. Maybe it's just waking up one day and thinking, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending I don't need anything. This breaking point isn't failure, it's awakening. It's your system finally saying, survival mode worked when I needed to survive. But I don't just want to survive anymore, I want to actually live. And living means being seen, means having needs, means risking rejection for the possibility of genuine connection. For many people, this breaking point comes in therapy. When a therapist asks, what do you need? And instead of the automatic, nothing, I'm fine, something different comes out. Tears, rage, the truth, I need someone to see me. I need to stop performing. I need to be allowed to be human. Or it comes in a relationship where someone finally asks, why don't you ever let me help you? Why do you always have to be strong? And instead of deflecting, you tell the truth. Because I learned that needing people gets me hurt, and I'm terrified that if I need you, you'll leave. That moment of radical honesty, terrifying as it is the beginning of healing. Because you can't heal in silence. You can't unlearn don't ask for love without practicing asking for love. In The Gifts of Imperfection, Brené Brown writes, owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. You've been running from your story of emotional neglect your entire life. The breaking point is when you finally stop running and turn to face it. So how do you unlearn a lifetime of not asking for love? How do you relearn that your needs aren't dangerous? The answer isn't a quick fix. It's a gradual rewiring that happens through repeated experiences of, I asked for something, I wasn't rejected, I'm still safe. Step 1, start recognizing your needs. You can't ask for what you don't know you need. So the first step is reconnecting with your internal world. Start simple. Am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I overwhelmed? When your chest tightens or your jaw clenches, pause and ask, what am I actually feeling right now? What do I need? At first, you might get nothing. That's okay. You're rebuilding neural pathways that have been dormant for decades. Keep asking. Eventually, quiet answers will emerge. I need rest. I need connection. I need someone to listen. Step 2, practice micro-asks with safe people. You don't have to start by expressing your deepest needs to your most unpredictable parent. Start small with people who've proven themselves safe. I'm having a hard day. Can we talk? I need help with this. Would you mind? I'm feeling overwhelmed. Can you just sit with me? These micro asks feel massive at first. Your nervous system will scream, "Danger, they'll reject you!" But when they don't reject you, when they respond with care instead of criticism, something shifts. Your brain gets new data. Wait, I asked for something, and they stayed, and I'm okay. Repeat this enough times, and the neural pathway for asking equals rejection starts to weaken. A new pathway for asking equals connection starts to form. Step 3. Therapy with someone who understands attachment trauma. You need a space where you can practice being fully seen without performance, where your needs are validated, not minimized. A good therapist specializing in childhood emotional neglect will help you identify your core wounds. Challenge the beliefs that formed around those wounds. Practice expressing needs in a safe relationship. Grieve what you didn't get. Learn to give yourself what you always needed. In complex PTSD, from surviving to thriving, Pete Walker describes this as reparenting yourself, becoming the nurturing presence you never had. Step 4, learn to tolerate discomfort without shutting down. When you express a need and someone responds imperfectly, your instinct will be, "See, I shouldn't have asked. Never again." But healthy relationships aren't about perfection. They're about repair, about misunderstanding followed by understanding, about mess followed by reconnection. Practice staying present through the discomfort. Practice saying, "That response hurt. Here's what I actually needed." This is revolutionary for someone who learned to disappear at the first sign of conflict. Step 5, practice self-compassion when you regress. You will have days where you can't ask for anything, where the old programming takes over and you return to, "I'm fine. I need nothing." That's not failure. That's trauma recovery, which is never linear. On those days, talk to yourself the way you'd talk to a scared child. "I know this is hard. I know asking feels dangerous, but you're safe now, and you deserve to have needs." In Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach, she writes, "The boundary to what we can accept is the boundary to our freedom." You have to accept that you were wounded, that you learned to silence yourself, and that unlearning silence takes time, patience, and repetition. Here's the profound truth about healing from emotional neglect. No one is coming to rescue the child who learned not to ask. Not your parents. They likely can't give you what they didn't have themselves. Not your partner. It's not their job to heal your childhood. Not your friends. They can support you, but they can't replace what you lost. The person who has to finally answer that child standing in the doorway, needing comfort, learning to disappear, is you. You are the one who has to go back and say, "I see you. I'm sorry no one came. I'm sorry you learned your needs were dangerous, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving." This is what therapists call reparenting, becoming for yourself the parent you needed but didn't have. It means noticing when you're struggling instead of powering through, offering yourself comfort instead of criticism, validating your feelings instead of dismissing them, meeting your needs instead of suppressing them, speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to a beloved child. When you make a mistake, instead of, "I'm so stupid, what's wrong with me?" you practice, "Everyone makes mistakes. I'm learning. This doesn't define my worth." When you're tired, instead of, "I don't have time to rest. I need to keep going," you practice, "My body is telling me it needs rest. Rest isn't earned. Rest is a necessity." When you need connection, instead of, "I'm being needy, I should handle this alone," you practice, "Humans need connection. Asking for support is strength, not weakness." In The Body Keeps the Score, van der Kolk writes that trauma healing happens when we finally give ourselves what we were denied: attunement, safety, and unconditional acceptance. You have to become the person who finally says, "Your needs matter. Your feelings are valid. You deserve love just for existing. And at first, you won't believe it. It will feel like lying to yourself. But if you repeat it, if you act as if it's true, even when it doesn't feel true, something remarkable happens. Your nervous system slowly learns, maybe I don't have to earn love. Maybe I'm allowed to need things. Maybe I'm safe being seen. Comment reparenting if you're learning to give yourself what you never got. Share this with someone who needs permission to need. Let's go back to that doorway, to that child who learned the most devastating lesson, that asking for love is dangerous. That child is still in you, still standing in that doorway, still scared to ask. And I need you to understand something. They weren't wrong to stop asking. They were protecting themselves in the only way they knew how. They were adapting to an environment where emotional expression led to rejection. They weren't weak. They were brilliant. They survived. But surviving is different from thriving, and you don't have to just survive anymore. You can go back to that child and tell them something no one else did. You were never too much. Your needs weren't a burden. You deserve to be seen, heard, held, and loved unconditionally. The adults in your life couldn't give you what you needed, not because you weren't worthy, but because they weren't capable. Their absence wasn't your fault. You didn't fail to earn their love. They failed to give what every child deserves. And now, you get to learn something they never taught you. You're allowed to ask. You're allowed to need. You're allowed to be fully human. This is the work. This is the healing. Not moving on from the past, but finally making peace with the child who learned silence was survival. And slowly, painfully slowly at first, you can learn to ask again. Not with everyone, not all at once, but in safe relationships, with safe people, you can practice saying, I need help. I'm not okay. I'm scared. I need you to see me. I need to know you're not leaving. And when those needs are met with care instead of rejection, when people stay instead of sighing and turning away, something inside you begins to heal. The neural pathways that learned asking equals danger slowly weaken. New pathways form. I can ask. I can need. I can be vulnerable. And I'm still safe. I'm still loved. I'm still worthy. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl writes, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. You have that space now. You have that power. The stimulus is still there, the old wound, the learned silence, the fear of rejection. But now you get to choose a different response. I'm going to ask anyway. I'm going to risk being seen. I'm going to practice believing I'm worthy of care. There will be a moment, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually when someone asks you, what do you need? And instead of the automatic, nothing, I'm fine, something different comes out. The truth, raw and vulnerable and terrifying. I need to know I'm not too much. I need to know you're not leaving. I need to stop pretending I have everything together. And in that moment, you'll hold your breath. Your nervous system will scream. Your childhood programming will brace for rejection. But then, something miraculous might happen. They'll stay. They'll see you. They'll hold space for your need without making it about them. And you'll realize, I asked, and I wasn't rejected, and the world didn't end. That single experience, repeated enough times, can rewrite decades of conditioning. Because your brain needs evidence that asking is safe. And you can't get that evidence without asking. So yes, you'll have to risk. Yes, you'll have to be vulnerable. Yes, some people might not respond well. But the alternative, spending your entire life pretending you need nothing while dying inside, that's not safety. That's slow death. In The Gifts of Imperfection, Brené Brown writes, Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. You are not weak for needing. You're human. You are not broken for having been hurt. You're wounded. And wounds, given the right conditions, can heal. Hit like if you believe one honest moment can change everything. Healing from emotional neglect isn't about never being triggered again. It's about building emotional safety both internally and in your relationships. Internal emotional safety means creating a relationship with yourself where your needs aren't shameful, where your feelings aren't too much, where you can be imperfect and still be worthy. It means developing an internal voice that sounds like the parent you needed. You're allowed to be tired. Your feelings make sense. You don't have to earn rest. You're doing your best, and that's enough. It means catching yourself when the old programming kicks in, I'm being too needy, and consciously reframing, I'm being human. Humans have needs. External emotional safety means choosing relationships with people who can hold your vulnerability without making you feel like a burden. People who don't punish you for having feelings, who don't guilt you for having needs, who don't sigh when you're struggling. People who respond to, I'm having a hard time with, tell me about it, instead of, again? And equally important, learning to recognize when someone isn't emotionally safe. When they minimize your feelings, you're overreacting. When they dismiss your needs, you're too sensitive. When they punish vulnerability, why are you always so dramatic? You get to say, this relationship isn't safe for me. I deserve to be with people who don't make me feel like my humanity is a problem. This is revolutionary for someone who learned to accept whatever scraps of affection were offered. In Wired for Love, Stan Tatkin explains that healthy relationships are built on mutual emotional safety, where both people can be vulnerable without fear. But if you've never experienced that, you don't know what to look for. You don't know what emotional safety even feels like. So part of healing is learning to recognize it. This person makes me feel safe. I can be myself here. I don't have to perform. And when you find those people, treasure them. Practice with them. Risk being seen by them. Because every time you're vulnerable and met with care, you're rewriting the story that asking for love is dangerous. Here's what someone should have told you when you were young. What you need to hear now as an adult. Dear child who stopped asking for love, I see you. I see how hard you've worked to need nothing. How you've turned yourself into the easiest, quietest, most convenient version of yourself because you learned that's the only way to be tolerated. I see how you scan every room, reading faces, adjusting yourself, making sure you're not too much in any direction. I see how exhausted you are, how lonely, how disconnected from your own heart because you've spent so long protecting others from it. And I want you to know, you were never the problem. Your needs weren't too much. Your feelings weren't too big. Your sadness wasn't a burden. Your joy wasn't inconvenient. The adults in your life couldn't hold you not because you were unlovable, but because they were incapable. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe they were dealing with their own unhealed wounds. Maybe they simply didn't have the emotional capacity to attune to a child's needs. Whatever the reason, their inability to love you fully was never evidence of your unworthiness. You didn't fail to earn their love. You were a child. Children don't earn love. They receive it. It should have been freely given. And now, decades later, you're still living like that child, still proving, still performing, still terrified that if you ask for anything, you'll be rejected. But you don't have to live that way anymore. You can learn to ask again. You can learn that your needs aren't dangerous. You can learn that the right people won't sigh when you're struggling. It won't be easy. Your nervous system will fight you every step. Your old programming will scream that vulnerability equals rejection. But I promise you, on the other side of that fear is connection, real, genuine, soul-deep connection. The kind where you're fully known and still fully loved, where you can be imperfect and still be chosen, where you can need and still be safe. You've spent your whole life believing you had to earn love. It's time to learn the truth. You are worthy of love simply because you exist. Not because of what you do, not because of how useful you are, not because of how convenient you make yourself, because you are a human being, and human beings deserve to be seen, heard, held, and loved. You are allowed to ask. You are allowed to need. You are allowed to take up space. And the people who truly love you won't make you feel like any of that is a burden. With love, the part of you that remembers you're worthy. Let me tell you what life looks like on the other side of this healing. You wake up and you don't immediately scan your mental to-do list to see what you need to accomplish to justify existing that day. You have a feeling sadness, anger, fear, and instead of immediately suppressing it, you pause. You ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What do I need? Someone asks, how are you? And you tell the truth. Not the performative, I'm fine, but the actual truth. I'm struggling today. And when they respond with care instead of judgment, you don't deflect. You receive it. You let yourself be seen. You're in a relationship where you can say, I need reassurance right now, without feeling like you're failing at being low maintenance. You make a mistake at work, and instead of spiraling into shame, you think, everyone makes mistakes. This is how I learn. You rest without guilt. You take a day off without having to justify it with productivity the next day. You exist without having to earn the right to exist. You're with friends, and you don't spend the whole time monitoring their emotions, making sure everyone's happy, performing the version of yourself that seems safest. You just are. Authentically, imperfectly, humanly yourself. And the people who love you, they love that version. They don't need you to be perfect. They don't need you to never have needs. They just need you to be real. This isn't fantasy. This is what's possible when you heal from emotional neglect. When you unlearn the belief that love must be earned. When you learn that your needs aren't dangerous. When you practice asking for what you need until your nervous system finally believes you're safe doing so. In Daring Greatly, Brené Brown writes, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. You've spent your whole life being who you thought you had to be to avoid rejection. Now you get to discover who you actually are, and you get to learn that that person, the real, unedited, needy, imperfect, fully human version of you, is worthy of love. Comment, this is possible, if you're choosing to believe in this future. Hit like if you're ready to build it. The child who stopped asking for love didn't stop needing it. They just learned to hide the need, to bury it so deep that even they forgot it was there. But needs don't disappear when you ignore them. They just grow quieter, more desperate, more distorted. They show up as anxiety, as perfectionism, as people-pleasing, as the inability to rest, as relationships where you give everything and receive crumbs. They show up as that hollow feeling you can't name, the sense that something is missing even though your life looks fine on paper. What's missing is you, the authentic you, the you who has needs and feelings and limits and desires. That you got buried under decades of learning to be convenient. And healing means excavating them. It means going back to that child standing in the doorway, learning that asking is dangerous, and saying, I'm here now. You don't have to be silent anymore. It means learning slowly, painfully, courageously, to ask for love again. Not perfectly, not all at once, but in small moments with safe people, you practice saying, I need something. Can you help me? And when they do help, when they respond with care instead of resentment, something inside you begins to shift. The belief that asking is dangerous starts to crack, light gets in. And you realize, maybe I don't have to earn love. Maybe I'm allowed to need things. Maybe I've always been worthy, and I just couldn't see it. This is the journey. From silence to voice. From performing to being. From earning to receiving. It's not easy. Your nervous system will resist every step. Your old programming will tell you it's safer to need nothing. But I promise you, the life where you're allowed to be fully human is worth every moment of discomfort it takes to get there. You stopped asking for love because asking hurt too much. But you can learn to ask again, and the right people will answer with the care you always deserved. The child you were is still waiting. Go back for them. Bring them home. Tell them what they needed to hear. And then, together, you and that child start asking for what you need. Because you were never too much. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't hold you. And now, you get to find people who can. If this changed something in you, tell me in the comments which part hit hardest. Subscribe if you believe healing is possible. Share this with someone still learning to ask. Because the child who stopped asking for love deserves to know, you're allowed to ask again. You're allowed to need. You're allowed to be loved for being human, not for being perfect. And somewhere, someone is waiting to love you exactly as you are. You just have to be brave enough to let them see you. That bravery starts now.